Will it be necessary to repeat what we have been talking about in the last 4 gatherings here? Perhaps some of you have come for the first time here, or some of you may have not really listened at all. And some of you are here probably out of curiosity and an unfortunate reputation. But I think we should go over what we said the last few talks very briefly, and those who have heard it, please have the goodness to forgive what has already, if you hear what has already been said. We were saying not only this part of the world, but probably everywhere else, the human brain, the human conduct, the behavior, the morality and so on, must be salvaged. That is, to be saved, to be rescued. And people perhaps don't seem to care very much what is happening to them, both in their psychology, there, to the earth, to the air, to the sea, which is being polluted, which is being slowly being destroyed by human beings, by you, by the rest of us. And we hardly give any thought to it. And if we do, we join some kind of a little group to do something about it and get lost with the group's quarrels, with the group therapy and so on, so on, so on. But seeing that the salvage can only be made or brought about in the brain of the human beings themselves. The brain itself has to be rescued. The brain itself is losing its quality, its quickness, its perceptibility, its sensitivity, its capacity to think objectively, sanely, rationally, not according to any philosopher, however clever, or any particular political division, right, left, right, center. Nor can the politicians solve this problem, nor the scientists, the biologists, the economists, the gurus, and the various religious organizations, whether it be Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, and so on. It's fairly obvious for any observant, thinking man that none of these can solve our problems. And as we said, we have to inquire. And the skeptical inquiry into the nature of man, the psychological world as well as the intellectual world, the investigation of that through skepticism, never believing anything, never following anybody, nor obeying, except the laws, of course. If you don't pay taxes, you'll be held up. But also, there is so much corruption going on with regard to all that, not only in this country, but everywhere else. Perhaps more so in this country. Corruption has become the way of life here. Seeing all this, that no philosopher, no politician, no organized religious group can ever solve this problem of human existence, which is now degenerating, which has become corrupt, which lacks utter integrity. Then there is no spirit of cooperation. Naturally, from all this, as we said last week, we have great disorder in our lives, not only our daily life, but in the society in which we live. The society being our relationship with each other, our daily human relationship, in which there is a great deal of conflict, pain, anxiety, loneliness, and all the rest of that. And also, we talked about, last time we met here, about order and disorder. We said disorder, as we explained very carefully, is caused by thought itself. Thought is the origin of this disorder in which we live. Disorder that exists between nations, that nations invented, thought out by thought, the division between religions, the division between political parties, the division that exists among the scientists who are competing with each other, jealous, more money, more Nobel Prizes. All this indicates a great deal of disorder. It's finally war. So in observing all this, we inquired, what is the cause of all this? Why man, after so many millions of years, has come down to the lowest point in his existence? Why? We like to attribute this disorder to some fantastic causes. But actually, this disorder is in our minds, in our brains. Perhaps we would not like to admit that. Our consciousness is in disorder. It is in confusion. Disorder is where there is conflict within oneself and outwardly. And we also said, and we'll continue with what we're going to talk about this afternoon, that knowledge which we have acquired through experience of millions and millions of years, that knowledge as memory stored up in the brain, from which arises thought and action. This is the chain in which we are caught. Experience, knowledge, stored in the brain as memory, from which thought arises, and from that action. This is the chain in which the brain, through millennia, is caught. And knowledge has become extraordinarily important for all of us. Because knowledge gives us a means of livelihood. That's why our education has so conditioned our minds to pursue a career, earn a livelihood, skillfully or not, efficiently or not, and survive some way or another. And knowledge, which we so cherish and worship, knowledge which we have acquired from the books, whether religious or technical, knowledge that we have acquired from our own personal experiences, knowledge which has been given to us through tradition, this knowledge that's stored up in our brain is now being transferred to the computer. Please follow all this, if you care to. And let me also, if one may, ask and suggest that we think together, observe these things together. Together, I mean together. The speaker is sitting on a platform, a little bit higher than you, because for convenience. But he is not sitting in any state of authority. It's merely for convenience. So, in this inquiry, there is no authority whatsoever. We are together exploring into the cause of this present confusion, why man is declining so rapidly, morally, even physically, and intellectually. And of course, in all this there is no love. We have relationship, sexual pleasure, all the rest of it. That's not love. Desire is not love. And this confusion, which is brought about by thought. Thought itself is the cause of confusion. We went into that very, very carefully. It's not that the speaker is saying something with which you disagree or agree, but you can investigate it for yourself and test it. You can inquire into it skeptically, with a great deal of doubt. Not doubt about what you have learned, what the books say, what the Gita or the Bible or your pet religious book says. But question, doubt, be skeptical in your inquiry. And that is the religious mind. The mind that is capable of being skeptical in its investigation. Not who is religious, the man with a beard, the man with a loincloth, or the man who goes to a temple 10 times a day, or to the mosque. He's not a religious man. Religion requires a great deal of diligence, and that diligence, which is to observe conduct, conduct in our daily life with each other, which has nothing whatever to do with any philosophy, with any religion. They talk about it, but actually in our lives, in our daily, confusing, unhappy life, we are investigating that, not some theory, belief, ideals, or what some book says. So together we are going this evening, as all the previous evenings, together, walk the same path, same road, take the same journey, so that we understand communication is necessary through words. The speaker has no particular jargon, neither scientific, nor religious, nor any other words except simple, ordinary, daily words spoken in English. And the words are not the thing. Your wife or your husband, the word husband, the wife is not the person. So in inquiring, we must be very, very careful about words, knowing that the word is never the thing, knowing explanations are not the actualities. So as our mind, brain, is caught in verbal structure, because to us words means great deal. To be called a Muslim means a great deal to a Muslim, or to a Hindu, or to a Buddhist, or to a communist. If you call him a fascist, he will be very, very upset. But the communist is a fascist. So one must be extremely alert that in investigation we are not investigating the words, or in the process of examination there is no abstraction as an idea, but actual observation, what's going on. So that our mind, our brain is active, not sluggish, with words, with conclusions, with beliefs. So together we are going to the whole question, why knowledge, intellectual, knowledge through experience, knowledge which we have acquired through tradition, whether that very knowledge, please listen, I'm questioning, I'm not saying it yet, I'm exploring, whether that knowledge itself is not the cause of this immense confusion. Not knowledge about the Gita, about the Upanishads, or any of those books. Books are not sacred. Printed word is not sacred, but you can attribute to that book what you like. So please, one may again point out, we are we are observing together, examining together, being aware that word explanation is not the actuality. So, this knowledge that we have acquired through education, through experience, through the past generation upon generations. This knowledge may be, please listen carefully, may be the cause of our disaster. Because we are burdened with the past. Knowledge is always the past. And that knowledge, being the past, is incomplete. And that knowledge being incomplete, and action then being incomplete, that action must inevitably create confusion, fragmentation. Where there is fragmentation, there must be not only conflict but confusion, like nations fragmented, like religious groups fragmented, beliefs divide man, ideals divide man. All these are fragmentations, and therefore there must inevitably be conflict, and therefore confusion. So we are inquiring together whether knowledge is not the cause, which is thought. Thought is not the cause of this tremendous decay of man. Thought, as we said, has created extraordinary things. The whole technological world. The surgery, medicine, communication, going to the moon, and so on. And also thought has created war and all the material to kill man. Thought has also written marvelous poems. I was just reading Keats' Ode to the Nightingale. Marvelous poem. But it is put into verse by thought. The pictures, the architecture, the temples, and what is inside the temples, inside the churches, all created by thought. So thought in the world, in the physical world, at certain areas, has brought benefit to man. At other areas, destroying man. That is knowledge. And this knowledge, which we have acquired through our senses, and therefore connected with the brain, this knowledge man acquired is now being transferred to the computer. I do not know if you are aware of all this. The computer can do everything that man can do. It can learn. It has been programmed as our brain is programmed to be a Catholic, to be a Protestant, to be a Hindu, to be a Buddhist. You understand all this? Of course, if you pay, your brain is programmed. Whether you like it or not, you have to observe it. Otherwise, you won't call yourself Hindu or a communist. Your brain has been cultivated through time, and through that, and time, which is the acquisition of experience, knowledge, and so on, that brain has been programmed has been conditioned to respond according to certain reactions. This is inevitable. That brain is now being given over to the computer. Please realize this. The computer is becoming your brain, the human brain. The computer plus the robot are already operating in manufacturing things, like cars. All kinds of things are happening. In about 10, 15 years, you will be unemployed. You have to face all this. Society is going to be turned upside down. It's coming. Whether you like it or not, and you're at your door. Do you understand the seriousness of all this? I wonder if you do. That your brain, which has been so extraordinarily capable, suffered innumerable sorrows, lives in great anxiety, frightened, insecure, the whole psychological world, which is the result of thought. That thought, with all its knowledge, is being transferred to the computer and the robot. So man, then what is he? You understand my question? If the computer can do everything that you can, your brain can, which is it can learn, it can correct itself, it can foresee what much more than human beings can. Its responses are instantaneous because it's programmed that way. Then, what is man? You understand all this? The computer say, I believe in God. Oh, you people laugh. You don't see this seriousness of all this happening to all of us. The computer can compose a poem. Can compose, can diagnose better than any doctor. You understand? And then one asks, what is man? What are you? If the machine can do everything even better than you, what are you? Which is, our brains have operated mechanically, right? It believes, it doesn't believe. It creates its own gods, its own philosophies. The computer can create a philosophy better than any philosopher. So, what have we left? You understand my question? If the machine can take over everything that man can do, and do it still better than us, then what is a human being? What are you? your belief in God, the machine has a belief in God. It'll do rituals better than you can do. It can invent theories better than any philosopher. Do you understand all this? So what have we left? What we have left is our psychology, our psychological world. You understand? Our sorrow, our fears, our pleasures, our anxieties, our immense loneliness. You understand all this? That's what we are going to be left with. Not with your gods. The gods have been invented by man, by thought. You have shaped gods according to your desires, your fears. So computers can do all that. So what we are going to be left with is time. Biological time, psychological time, and time as day and night. That's what we're going to be left with. Time. And biologically, time is necessary. That's part of the genes, where it is. Genes also probably is computerized in time, to have time to grow physically. And you have psychological time. That is hope, the future, the burden of the past, the anxiety, the fear, the immense, everlasting pursuit of pleasure, and not only your own particular sorrow, but the sorrow of mankind, of which you are. This is what we're going to be left with. Right? Please, I hope we both are together observing the same thing. Not the speaker is observing and telling you about it. But we are together observing the facts. What is actually going on, of which most of us are not aware. Technology is advancing so rapidly. And everything that we human beings are doing now, going to the office from 9 to 5 or for the next 50 years, and the education that's being given to students, you understand? All that's going to be taken over. For God's sake, realize. So, we are going to be left with all our senses. Senses which create, which is the center of the brain, and our senses either deteriorate gradually because we are incapable of using them anymore, because we are only pursuing pleasure. You are following all this? And so we have to find out what time means. Right? There is the biological time, psychological time, time by the sun set and sunrise, the new moon and the full moon. So the three times, biological, psychological, time by the watch. We can perhaps control or change the biological time, which is also, you see what's happening in the world. Little boys and girls are already having babies. Deformed, because their wombs are small. I don't know what you're all doing. This is happening, sirs. And there is a psychological time. You can't do anything about the chronological time. You can perhaps get up earlier, go later to bed. But you have only one factor, that is psychological time. That time is the movement of thought in consciousness. You don't agree with me, see it for yourself. Consciousness is made up of its content, right? The computer has its conscience. Because it's programmed to think this way, that way, answer rapidly and so on, which is what our consciousness is. I wonder if you see all the implications of it. Our consciousness, which is the accumulated beliefs, the accumulated confusions, the accumulated problems, the beliefs, the superstitions, the fears, the nationalities, the ideals, being left, politically left, center, right, all that is our consciousness, which is the computer is. You realize? So, what are we going to do with our life? You understand? Either because we have time, leisure, and all the trouble which we take now to go to factories, work, computer and the robot are going to take over. Then what is man going to do? Either you're going to pursue entertainment, which is pleasure, you understand? The religious pleasures, entertainment, Tirupati, Rome, cathedrals, temples. Either you enter into the whole area of entertainment, and perhaps that's what's going to happen. Because we have lived on entertainment. Entertainment from books. If you are inclined to be a philosophic mind, books, being entertained in philosophy. If you are entertained by Gita, Upanishads, Bible, you go in for that entertainment. Or you're being entertained by rituals, the mass, the temple worship, all that's going on, which is all entertainment. or you turn inwardly. You understand? That's the only things we have left. Entertainment or deep inquiry into oneself. Inquiry into the psychological world, the senses, the fears, the pleasures, whether there is ever an ending to sorrow. What is love? You understand? Whether what death means. Because the computer will say, I believe in hereafter. You understand what I'm saying? So together, let's go inward. You understand what I'm saying? Let us together examine whether there is an ending to fear, whether there is an ending to insecurity, not physical insecurity, because the computer may change the whole structure of society, as it's happening already. So we have only two things left to us: entertainment or going deeply into the world of the psyche and going beyond. The scientists are also becoming entertainers. Like the priests. So you cannot possibly depend on scientists to salvage our inward state, nor the psychologist, nor the priest. There is nobody that can help us except our own observation. Which doesn't mean that we become more and more selfish. We are examining the human consciousness, the human brain. Your brain is not yours. It's the brain of humanity, because it has lived millions and millions of years. So in examining, investigating through skeptical exploration, we are examining not to become more mischievous, more ugly, more inwardly despicable, crooked, corrupt. We are examining so that the brain, with all its activity taken over by computer, then we are investigating nature, whether thought, which has created the psyche, whether that thought, which is time, can stop. You understand? Please, thought is time, right? Thought is the result of memory. Memory is knowledge, experience stored in the brain. Therefore, it is a movement. Thought is a movement of time. Right? And we are going to inquire very, very deeply whether there is a stop to time. First of all, to observe. You understand? To observe what is going on inwardly, which is the result of senses, the various senses centered in the brain. Otherwise, you wouldn't react. So the center of the brain is the accumulation of the senses, from which thought arises. And thought has created the me and the you. Thought has created the individual. But thought itself being fragmented, right? Because knowledge can never be complete. That thought has invented the individual, and so the individual is incomplete. And there is no individual. Because your brain is the brain of humanity. Your brain has evolved through millions and millions of years. Therefore, you are not an individual. That's the first thing to realize. It's illogical. It's not something invented by the speaker. You can see it for yourself if you examine it. So the idea that investigating this psyche, you are becoming more and more selfish, or you're going to be saved. This is not an individual salvation. It's the salvation of the human being, not you, Mr. Smith, or Mr. Rao, or Mr. whatever your name is, sorry, including myself. So first, as we said, to learn the art of listening. Listening to yourself, never distorting what you listen to. Right? That is, are you listening now? What the speaker is saying, or you are distorting what the speaker is saying to suit your own theories, conveniences, happiness, comfort, this or that. Or saying tradition has already said this. Which indicates that you're not listening. So first thing is to learn the art of listening. Not only to the speaker, which is unimportant, but listening to your wife, listening to your son, listening to your husband. And you cannot listen if you have an image about him or her, a conclusion about him or her. That will prevent you from listening. Right? Do it, sir. If you listen that way, your brain becomes extraordinarily sensitive, alert, active, which is not now. Then, the art of seeing. The seeing without the word. You understand? To see something like a flower and not name it. Because the word prevents you from seeing. You understand what? Come on, move, sir. That means the seeing implies not bringing previous memory in perception. Right? Then you don't see. If you want to see your wife or your husband as they actually are, do you want to see your wife or your husband actually? Without the image you have created about her or him? If you want to look, observe, see your wife, not the physical form, not the pleasure you have derived through sex, through intimacy, through comfort and all that, but to see her or him as it is purely. That's an art. Either you give, please listen, either you give time to learn the art, as you give time to learn language, and then when you give time to learn the art of seeing, what have you done? You haven't seen your wife at all. It's like a man saying, I pursue non-violence, that's my ideal, while he is being violent. You understand this? So, to see without time, that means without the previous conclusions, previous records. I wonder if you understand all this. It is necessary if you want to look into yourself, if you want to observe the whole psychological world of which you are, in which there is no guide. There is no priest, there is no psychologist, there is no psychotherapist. You are watching yourself. So you have to learn the art of listening to yourself. Do you see what it does? If you do it now, you see how your brain becomes extraordinarily supple, sensitive, active. And to see without the previous records that you have accumulated. Then memory is operating, not the optical, clear observation. Right? And also, one has to find the art of learning. Learning, as we know it now, is merely accumulating knowledge, which is mechanical. You learn to speak a language, English, French, or Tamil, whatever the language is, and you accumulate it and then speak. And that's our brain is used to that, which is time. Right? Is there a learning without time? You don't, which is seen instantly. That is, look. Man is violent, probably inherited from the animal and so on. Let's go into the cause of it for the moment, because each person will say the cause is different and we'll get lost in the disputation of various causes. But we are violent. Human beings are violent. Now, when you say I will become non-violent, you are learning to become something. Right? See, sir, please see what you're doing. You are learning through time to become. Right? Right? That is, your whole conditioning psychologically is to become something. If you are naughty, you become good. If you are angry, you hope not to be angry. If you are violent, you become... So, we use time as a means to learn to become something, or not to become something. That's our operation. That's how our brain works. Now, to see violence and not change it to become something else, but to see violence, you understand, careful, we are thinking together, please do it as I'm talking about it. If you don't like violence, take your own particular form of greed, envy, or anger, whatever, smoke, whatever you do, take it, look at it. You say when you are greedy, I will get over it, or I will transmute it, or I will suppress it, which are all movements of time. During that time, other things happen which prevent you from ultimately becoming non-greedy. Of course. So, you see that. You see that's a fact. You see it. Do you? That the becoming involves time. During that time, you are learning how to become that. Which is, you are being computerized or programmed to become that. I wonder if you see that. Whereas there is a different way of learning, which is, you are observing yourself. If you observe yourself and you have learnt something about yourself, and with that from that learning you observe, you're not observing yourself. You understand the difference? Are you coming with me? That is, if I'm watching my greed, and I say I must not be greedy, because that's my brain has been conditioned or been told religiously and all that blah, not to be greedy. So I say I will learn not to be greedy, which involves learning, restraining, controlling, suppressing, all that. Right? That's clear. That's what we do. Now we're asking, is there a different way of looking at greed? The meaning of the word greed may create greed, or is there a division between the word and the fact? You're following all this? So I'm watching what is greed, and the brain is not going to be caught in the old system of becoming, but seeing it as it is and ending it instantly. Do you understand? Not going through the other process, but ending that which is observed immediately. See what happens. Look, I must take this if you want to go into very deeply, it's extraordinarily clear it becomes. Our brains have problems, right? Sexual problems, relation problems, money problems, many problems. Our brains are filled with problems. Whether there is God, whether there is no God, what to believe, not to believe, and so on, so on, so on. Now, every problem, new problem arises, you try to solve it with all the problems that you have already. So you never solve problems, except technologically. Please understand this. Technological brain can solve problems. But our brains are psychologically so full of problems, any new problem becomes another problem to be added to the old problem. So, you understand, there is never an ending to problems. I don't know if you have realized all this. Or am I just pointing out to you? You are not learning from the speaker anything. Please realize this. Nothing. You are learning from your own observation. Therefore you are a dignified human being, not depending on anybody. So when you are observing yourself, when greed arises, to look for the cause is very simple, right? Desire, which we talked about the other day. To see greed and end it. So that your brain is not caught in time. You get it what I'm saying? Do it, sir. As you're sitting now, you have your own particular little problem. Look at it. Don't try to verbalize it. Don't try to run away from it. But just look at it. Stay with it. The moment you try to change it, you follow? You're caught in the time. But if you stay with it quietly without any movement of thought, you will see it is not. Right? So, there is the art of listening, the art of seeing, the art of learning. With that, you approach yourself. Right? You approach yourself, which is the whole psychological world. Because the computer has taken over everything you have. So you are watching yourself, which is watching the human consciousness, watching the human psyche. It's not your psyche. Because wherever you go in the world, doesn't matter where, human beings are suffering. Right? Human beings have fear. Human beings are pursuing pleasure. Human beings are afraid of death. Human beings have no love. Right? So it's a common factor. Your psyche is the common factor. So you are the whole of humanity. You understand, sir? I know this is something probably new to you, therefore you're rebelling and resisting it. But if you just listen to it, you will see that's a fact for yourself. You may have a different name, different color, different stature, different manners, but deep down, psychologically, you're like the rest of mankind. Mankind that's lonely. Mankind that is frightened. Mankind that is longing to escape from itself and burdened with sorrow of 1,000 years. You are that. So you are the representative, you are the rest of mankind. You are mankind. So when we investigate, we are investigating not your particular little me, which is part also, but investigate into the whole psyche of man. Therefore there is nothing selfish. There is nothing to be saved. This is not a religion. We are not talking about a religion of salvation. We are talking about the ending of fear. Fear is the result of thought. Right? Fear is the result of time. Fear of the past, fear of the future. Actual fear has no time. Only when thought says, I am afraid. I wonder if you understand this. When the moment of fear, thought is absent. Right? It's only a sensory responses, right? Centered in the brain, and thought says, I am afraid. I don't do it. You understand this? I'm afraid of losing my job. I'm afraid of losing my wife. I'm jealous because my wife, etc., etc. All that is the movement of thought. As pleasure is the movement of thought. Sexual pleasure. The picture, the image, all that. And also the various types of pleasure. Pleasure of having more money. Pleasure of power. Right? Pleasure of possession. Pleasure in attachment. With a wife, to a child, to a building, to an idea. And that attachment is corruption. Yes, sir. Attachment is corruption. Obviously, if you're attached to your wife, you're attached because for various reasons, very simple. Physical pleasure, psychological pleasure, and the comfort you derive or whatever it is, you are attached. Without her, you feel lost, lonely. Therefore, you are attached. So, from that attachment arises jealousy, anxiety, fear of losing, and so on. So, where there is attachment of any kind, there must be corruption. Right? So, do you see it? The truth of it? Do you see the fact of it? Then end it. But if you say, I'll think about it, I will learn about it, why should I not be attached? You know, all the rest, back and forth. Then you're back into the old system, right? Where time binds you. I wonder if you understand this. Our brains have become slaves to time. But if you see that, you can end time, which is ending thought. But before we go into much deeper things, this you must clear. Embrace a psyche that is not afraid, that has no fear, that isn't everlastingly pursuing pleasure in different forms. Possession, power, siddhis, becoming an ascetic, controlling oneself, all the various forms of pleasure. To look at it, to see what it is. It is not a pleasure when you see a sunset, beauty. But it becomes pleasure when thought says, I must have it again, I must go there again. You understand all this? So see it and do it instantly. Then we have to go into the also into a very complex problem of sorrow. Whether sorrow can ever end. Because if it does not end, there is no passion. Passion is totally different from lust, from desire, from pleasure. And we have lost that passion. Probably we've never had it. Passion, which has its own intelligence and therefore its own action. But you cannot find that passion cannot come into being if you have not understood or ended sorrow. And we'll go into that briefly perhaps tomorrow, and also find out what is a religious mind. It's only the religious mind that creates a new culture. Not machines, not the politician, not the economists, not the scientists or the gurus. The religious mind, the brain that is investigating into the nature of what is religion, but starts with skepticism. And we should perhaps, if we have time, we'll do that tomorrow.